you look at advanced aerospace, so next gen aerospace, whether that's hypersonics, supersonics, electric, spacecraft. I mean, there's even concepts for like a rocket to punch out of the atmosphere and come right back down in a different part of the world where you could get anywhere in the world in 30 minutes.
Yeah, crazy.
Right? All of that is increasing heat. And the number one issue really that the Department of Defense has highlighted in these new platforms coming to market is heat.
Yeah.
Because think about a hypersonic platform. You're going so fast that like the plane literally starts to melt.
Yeah, just the friction.
So you've got to find ways to get that heat off. And electric, same thing. I mean, if you look at a Tesla, the number one invention that they probably came up with outside of their infotainment and software suite is their heat pump, their removal of heat off the batteries that allows the batteries to go longer.
Yeah.
It's really deep technology, but it really matters a ton.
Yeah. And the more that we develop these technologies and electrify everything, the more, batteries and making things smaller become important, which just generates more heat. And then, heat degrades those batteries. So with undersea, for example, what's really important about this concept, our technology is strong enough to withstand the pressures of the Marianas Trench and still keep the battery or engines cool or the electronics cool in a submarine and withstand, the F-35 flying at whatever Mach it flies,
right,
and withstand a rocket launch to the moon and actually stay on the moon. So the whole spectrum for our technology is that it is extremely strong, extremely small, smaller than most heat exchanger thermal management systems have been in the past, and extremely efficient.
Yeah.
And that's what makes us unique.
So let's take a step back though and talk about this industry. So you have aerospace industry, you have this systems integrated industry, but you guys recently just finalized, I guess it would be a contract with a electric vertical and takeoff and landing EVTOL.
Another thing too about aerospace, if you want to know, like they do a really crappy job of naming things.
Yeah.
So
that acronym.
EVTOL. Yeah. Electric vertical takeoff and landing.
It's a horrible name.
It's a horrible name. So
it's
then
a flying Uber. Think of a flying Uber.
I was reading the Morgan Stanley did a market analysis on projections for the market, and then they just jumped into acronyms. I'm like, why did in the summary of the thing they already started with acronyms and don't title any of the acronyms. I'm like, oh my god,
acronyms.
So air mobility market is a segment of this market, which previously included a couple of other systems, but they really kind of divided into two. There's two futures of this air mobility market. One being transportation and logistics, and then like autos and shared transportation. So air mobility, shared. So the idea is, and a lot of people are like, your private aircraft that can jump you out of LA, get them out of traffic. It's a 30 to 45 minute flight, or maybe even less, right? 20 minutes that just kind of takes you out of one area and puts you in another in a quick way. This seems to be the biggest portion of these two markets. So just transportation, logistics, and autos. So, and that left out all of the military side of things, all of the stuff that we've been talking about already, and their projections, which I think it'd be tough to project this out in my view. By 2040, it would be a $1 trillion, and by 2050, a $9 trillion industry.
Yes.
And that's just for transportation, logistics, autos, and shared mobility. That doesn't even include any of the military side of things.
Right.
And so in my mind, where are you guys? Obviously, you're wanting to hit as much of the market as you can because it's so versatile what these systems can do. But this agreement you signed with Eve Air Mobility out of Brazil. Maybe talk a little bit about that and why that's a big first step, I think, for you guys. Maybe it's first. Is it a first step? Maybe it's
huge. Well, we've been in the military sector.
Yeah.
And so it's really important to us. One of the things that I want the audience to understand, because it's our local friends and family, is that what we're talking about for Intergalactic and our sister company RAM and others around us is that we want to be in St. George for a very long time. And to military contracts last a long time, which keeps us stable long term. But with military, you have ups and downs of the political cycle, which might bring funding or reduce funding. So you want to have a commercial part of your diversified portfolio.
Yeah, like Boeing, like in Huntington Beach, like I remember Boeing, they laid off like 1,200 people,
right?
Like just overnight, and then they immediately started hiring people back. Which is so odd.
That's this industry, and it drives us nuts. So
it's like within 3 months they're back hiring people again.
How you mitigate that is through a commercial sector, and really this is super stabilizing for Intergalactic because it gives and jobs in St. George because it gives us both commercial and military. So on the commercial side, with Embraer and what is happening with Eve, Eve is a spinoff of Embraer. Embraer makes those planes. If you go to the St. George airport and get on, one of the commuter jets, that's a Embraer airplane. United Airlines, uses those same kind of planes. And one of the things that they're trying to do is move toward electrifying airplanes. Yeah. So I think what will also blow some of your listeners' minds is that we are also working with companies like Embraer to move away from jet fuel and use electric airplanes, not just EVTOLs, but an electric plane that can fly you from here to Salt Lake. But the EVTOL, one of the ways that I think about it, and I want Brian to kind of talk about the futuristic side of this and put the Back to the Future spin on it. But one of the things that I have background in is our Life Flight helicopter here in town, and I was part of helping bring that here. And one thing people don't realize about these EVTOLs, sometimes when I talk to my parents, my boomer parents about this, they're like, "Well, I'll never take a flying taxi, a flying Uber around town." But what these also will do, because they're more stable than a helicopter, is these will replace helicopters, especially the fixed wing vertical takeoff aircraft. Because when you have a fixed wing as part of the equipment, then you are less likely to crash.
Well, and the interesting, this is just another sidebar benefit to this, is I was looking at a study on sound, and they're basically 5 times quieter.
Yep.
Now, granted, the decibel level is still high. It's not like you're not going to hear them buzz by, but they're significantly quieter than a helicopter. A helicopter, especially on takeoff, is insanely loud.
Exactly.
And that's not going to be the case.
You don't have a combustion engine.
Yeah, right.
So what about your thoughts about just the fun kind of futuristic side of
I don't, again, this industry is really crappy at helping people understand what we're working on. Mm-hmm. So,
the excitement about it.
So if you go to Silicon Valley, especially in consumer tech, which is not as technical as people think a lot of the time. So these are products that they're producing very quickly and they're bringing to market. Well, they market them a lot, right? We all know what they are and when they're coming out and everything else. And those things get us excited. Apple gets us excited. Aerospace is significantly more technical and more impactful in a lot of ways. And it does a very poor job of letting anyone know anywhere what's going on there. So this has been in the works for about 15 years. This isn't a new concept. Yeah. Flying taxis have a ton of political capital behind them because they are net neutral. They don't produce a carbon footprint. They allow people to get out of congested traffic. So if you're in Los Angeles and you want to go to Orange County, you can take let's say you could take a $40 Uber, or you can take an $80.
And 2 hours later.
Yeah. $40 for 2 hours or $80 for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
When you start thinking about it in those terms, and then you actually look at the safety and technology that they're baking into these, they're very stable. They're basically scaled up drones. They use LiDAR. They communicate with each other. Yeah. They've got so much redundancy built into them. They've got multiple fans carrying them. It's not just one fixed wing, helicopter prop that's spinning.
Right.
So you're not gimbling back and forth like you do in a helicopter. It's very, very steady, very, very easy to travel in. And I think once people experience that, it's going to be like, why would I ever want to be on the 5 at 4 p.m. ever again? Why? And so the government's looked at this and said, we need to dump money and research and everything else of this. And they've been doing that for a long time. Yeah. And private industry has really picked up the baton and said, we're going to go with this. So now you have about 300 companies that are producing flying taxis. Yeah. And several of them are already flying. And
a lot of these
it's going to change everything.
For the most part, they're unmanned, right?
They can be. So initially, for example, some of the customers we've worked with have said, we've made a deal with United Airlines. They're going to stage a pilot just so people feel like, oh, there's a pilot.
This is a funny conversation
And
because
you
you
can
bring up
manually
not
fly
having a
it.
pilot and you instantly lose people. They're like,
Right. But what
why
they
would
don't
we ever do
understand
that?
is it's so much safer.
If you talk to a pilot, especially one of like a 747,
Right.
it's like the thing flies itself. Like,
No, if you get on a 737 nowadays, like the 737 MAX, the pilots aren't flying it.
Yeah.
I mean, the intervention, a pilot can intervene, but this has already been going on. Autopilot's already here. It's already been there. So I think that people have to wrap their minds around that. But it is so fun to think we're going to have flying taxis. And some of them are a little odd looking right now, but there are some that look just like cars that you can personally buy and fly over congested traffic, which is probably in the next 10 years.
And the airspace is not occupied. So this is unoccupied airspace that's not being used really by commercial traffic now.
Yeah, and this is one
low
of the
altitude.
And this is one of the advantages, right? Is like you take this 2-dimensional space of a car or a train,
right? And
you're saying now I can get into three-dimensional space. Like just imagine like you're stuck in traffic because you just have this. There's only one. It's forward and backward, right? There's not really, and then you have intersections, right? Part of the traffic congestion isn't necessarily that the road isn't wide enough. It's because there's another road that intersects with it at some point, and people are trying to cross that road, right? So you have all these stops where you eliminate that in that 3-dimensional space.